Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Sacred Space with me, your host, Preetha Lal, as we spend time reading the book Eternal Values for a Changing Society by the late Srimad Swami Ranganathananda ji. As you are aware, if you're following this podcast, Swami Ranganathananda was the 13th president of the Ramakrishna Matan mission, but he was also so much more. He was a scholar par excellence, a spiritual ambassador, a philosopher, and a teacher. This multi-volume treatise that I have decided to read to you through this podcast is a testament to the breadth of his knowledge and the depth of his wisdom. In today's episode, we will continue the discussion of science and religion as Swami Ranganathananda talks about Dharma and Social Ethics and elucidates with so much clarity and depth on the Indian spiritual tradition. He talks about the para and apara vidya that we had touched upon in a few earlier episodes, if you recall, of this podcast. And he continues to set the stage more and more with a lot of depth on the scientific thought and inquiry from the times of ancient India and their obvious relevance and reflection in our modern day. Let us begin. Dharma as social ethics. The human being cannot advance on the long road of his spiritual growth or psychosocial evolution without disciplining his urges of organic satisfaction. He has to bring a certain measure of stabilization in his inner life through such discipline by his own knowledge and efforts. This is the second homeostasis to be achieved by him over and above the first homeostasis achieved by nature for him and to be dealt with in more detail later. In the second homeostasis that is emphasized by the Gita, namely Samatvam Yoga Uchyate, or yoga is called Samatvam or equanimity. This is the spiritual equivalent of the dictum of the great French physiologist Claude Bernard to be dealt with later, where he quotes, "A fixed interior milieu is the condition for the free life." It is this discipline that is indicated in the Indian concept of dharma, ethical sense, which is inseparable from any ordered human society. Bereft of it, the human becomes reduced to a beast, says Indian wisdom. Dharmena hina pashubhi samana. Dharma, as the principle of integration between person and person in society, does not mean religion in the sense of creed, doctrine, or ritual, or any scheme Dharma, as the principle of integration between person and person in society, does not mean religion in the sense of creed, doctrine, or ritual, nor any scheme of an otherworldly salvation. A mere accumulation of bricks does not constitute a building. It needs cement to unite brick to make it an integrated structure. Similarly, a mere aggregation of individuals does not constitute a society. There is an integrating principle that makes for the evolution of a dynamic and expansive personality out of a static individuality. And that helps to hold its members together. And that principle is dharma. It stresses the idea of mutuality, the interdependence. The human being needs the context of other human beings for his very humanization. This is how Sri Krishna expounds dharma in the Mahabharata. Dharanat dharma ityahu dharmo dharayate prajaha. The Purusharthas in the context of psychosocial evolution. Indian spiritual tradition does not frown or look down upon kama, organic satisfaction, or artha, wealth, which is the means to kama, but treats them as valid human pursuits or purusharthas. However, it considers lobh or greed, moha, delusion, arising from unchecked organic cravings as unethical because they are antisocial. And to restrain these two pursuits from becoming antisocial, it presents a third vital human pursuit or purushartha, namely dharma, ethical sense. It is this third purushartha, namely dharma, that helps all people, not just a few powerful and clever ones only, to experience the first two purusharthas, namely kama and artha. Dharma viruddho bhuteshu kamosmi bharatar sabha. I am that kama or sensual desire in all human beings, which is unopposed to dharma, O bull among the Bharatas, meaning Arjuna. Indian spiritual tradition refers to dharma, artha and kama as the Trivarga, the inseparable group of three, treats them as the universal warp and woof of all ordered human society, theistic, atheistic, or agnostic, and represents moksha, absolute freedom of the spirit, as the fourth purushartha, which is an optional trans-social pursuit meant for those few who desire and those who dare to dive deeper into the spiritual dimensions of reality and realize one's true nature in all its glory. For all the rest, this moksha experience comes within the limitations of the social context as dharma. Dharma, thus, in the confluence of the secular and the spiritual, of the social and the trans-social, and every sacred and secular literature of India sings its glory. Indian culture is rooted in and inspired by this great value of dharma. The mystical heights of Indian and all world religions are the expressions of the trans-social moksha ideal and value. The mystical heights of Indian and of all world religions are the expressions of the trans-social moksha ideal and value. It is an echo of this great value of dharma that we get in the concept of psychosocial evolution of 20th century biology and its corollaries concepts of quality and fulfillment as the criteria of evolution at the human stage, and in the emphasis on detachment from the ego and from the organic system and its cravings centered in it. Modern psychosocial evolution echoes the ancient Anashakti yoga of the Gita. Religion. Ethnical versus spiritual. A scientific study of religion reveals two dimensions to every religion, especially to every one of the highly developed world religions, namely religion as a socio-political expression and religion as a path to the experience of God, or any value equivalent to it. The first consists of the do's and don'ts of religion and the rules and regulations about food, dress, marriage, and other social disciplines, besides myths and legends and cosmological theories. These constitute the socio-political constituents of a religion, which find a place for it in the census, registers, and which demarcate it from other religions. It cannot constitute the science of religion, but only a historically conditioned socio-political expression of religion. A science of religion will classify religions in terms of their bhakti yoga, jnana yoga, raja yoga, and karma yoga contents. The second dimension consists of the truly spiritual part, with its emphasis on personal morality, worship and adoration, and the disciplines designed to ensure the spiritual growth of the human being. These constitute the essential and the invariable and the universal core of religion, while the former form its variable non-essential part, which is also relevant, but only when it does not choke the spirit of the latter. Indian tradition calls the former the Smriti and the latter the Shruti constituents of a religion, and it considers the Shruti as eternal and universal in validity, and the Smriti as local, parochial, and temporary in application. Accordingly, the Shruti represents the Sanatana Dharma, eternal religion, which remains, while the Smriti represents the Yuga Dharma, the religion for a particular yuga, age which changes. India, therefore, considers the Yuga Dharma constituent of a religion not only not applicable for all people universally, but even irrelevant to its own people of a later age due to changes in conditions of life of the people concerned. So the Indian tradition provides for appropriate changes in the Smritis and the Yuga Dharma to make them relevant for the changed social circumstances which render them obsolete and often harmful. Sri Ramakrishna expresses this Indian wisdom in a brief and meaningful utterance. The Mughal coins have no currency under East India Company's rule. Human and social distortions are the product of the dominance of these obsolete elements of a socio-religious tradition. They sustain the rigidities of a social customs, anti-human practices, interreligious and intra-religious frictions, disharmonies and persecutions, and the stagnation and immobility of human attitudes. The truly fundamental message of all religions, however, derives from their central core of essential spiritual truths which constitute their Shruti element. These spiritual truths are apara, impersonal and therefore universal. They are discovered by the scientists of religion, the mystics. The authenticity of these truths lies in their being expressed by spiritual experimenters, in their being capable of re-verification by others. Explaining this authenticity with respect to the Vedas of the Hindu tradition, Swami Vivekananda said in the course of his address at the Chicago Parliament of Religions, and the Swami quotes, "By the Vedas, no books are meant. They mean the accumulated treasury of spiritual laws discovered by different persons in different times. Just as the law of gravitation existed before its discovery and would exist if all humanity forgot it, so it is with the laws that govern the spiritual world. The moral, ethical, and spiritual relations between soul and between individual spirits and the Father of all spirits were there before the discovery and would remain even if we forgot them. The discoverers of these laws are called rishis or sages, and we honor them as perfected beings. I'm glad to tell this audience that some of these very greatest were women." Unquote. The above description can be relevant only with the respect to Shruti constituent of Hinduism and of every other world religion. The only difference lies in this, that it is only in the Hindu tradition that this distinction between the universality of the Shruti and the limited relevance of the Smriti is fully recognized and applied, and that social innovators and religious prophets are not only not persecuted and killed, but are honored and followed. And this blessing Hinduism owes to its immortal literature of the Upanishads, which is all Shruti with no touch of Smriti. They are the only sacred books, both within Hinduism and outside of it, which addressed themselves exclusively to the discovery of the spiritual truths and to leading people, irrespective of caste, creed, and race, to their realization of human life and to the creation in India of a dynamic and healthy climate of active toleration and harmony as the inalienable characteristic of Indian culture, religion, and life. In the light of the Shruti-Smriti concept, we see the kinship of science only with that aspect of religion as a spiritual path to God. The Shruti constituent and the very little kinship with its sociopolitical expression, the Smriti constituent. The term ethnical religion emphasizes the dominance of the Smriti element, with its group exclusiveness and sectarian loyalties. And it is this ethnical religion that stagnates in course of time, resists social change, and collides against physical science and all creative social endeavor. In all religions, the ethnic element in course of time becomes increasingly centered in the priest and the feudal power, and the universal spiritual element is centered in the prophet and the divine incarnation. The ethnical aspect of religion will continue to remain, but it must be subordinated, says the Hindu tradition, to the spiritual aspect if it is to aid the human being in his spiritual growth. India and the scientific approach to religion. The methods of investigation in the field of religion are largely the same as in the positive sciences. Collection of facts, their classification, a dispassionate study of these so as to reveal the law or laws underlying them, such knowledge leading to the control over the phenomena concerned, and finally the application of such knowledge for the technique of the human being's spiritual growth, for the alleviation of the human suffering, and for the enrichment and fulfillment of human life. This kind of religion, as a thorough scientific study of the facts of the inner life, was undertaken by the great sages of ancient India. The insights that they gained were retested and amplified by a galaxy of subsequent sages, leaving to posterity the invaluable legacy of a rich and dynamic scientific tradition in the field of religion. It is because of this adamantine, rational, and experiential base that Indian spirituality and the culture deriving nourishment from it have stood the test of time. That also explains its hospitality to modern physical science and its pride in the remarkable achievements of the sister discipline developed by the modern West. Says Roma Rolla about this quality of Indian philosophical thought in the life of Vivekananda on page 196, and the Swami quotes here, "The true Vedantic spirit does not start out with a system of preconceived ideas. It possesses absolute liberty and unrivaled courage among religions with regard to the facts to be observed and the diverse hypotheses it has laid down for their coordination. Never having been hampered by a priestly order, each man has been entirely free to search wherever he pleased for the spiritual explanation of the spectacle of the universe. After a thorough investigation into the nature of the human being, the sages of the Upanishads made a fundamental discovery. The human in his essential nature is divine. Behind the finite human is the Atman, ever free, ever pure, ever luminous. The body, the mind, and the ego are merely the externals of the real human, who is immortal and divine. This discovery led to the further discovery that the same divinity is the ground of the world as well. This they termed Brahman, the totality of the self and the not-self, which they characterized as Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam, truth, consciousness or knowledge, and infinity. Para-vidya and apara-vidya. In the Mundaka Upanishad, we find this question put by an earnest student to a great teacher. What is that reality, O Blessed One, by knowing which we can know all that there is in this manifested universe? Is there such a unique reality by knowing which we can understand all the manifestations of nature, internal as well as external? Is there a unity behind this diversity, a one behind the many? To this question, the teacher gave a very significant reply. He said, "Two are the vidyas, sciences, to be acquired by human beings, so say the knowers of Brahman. One is called the para-vidya, the higher science or knowledge. The other is called the apara-vidya, ordinary science or knowledge. Both these must be investigated. Of these, the apara or the ordinary knowledge says that the teacher of the Upanishad consists of the sacred Vedas, phonetics, the code of rituals, grammar, etymology, prosody, and astronomy. In fact, it includes what we would today call the entire gamut of positivistic knowledge, including the second-hand knowledge of the experience of religion contained in the sacred books of all religions. Here we meet with a scientific mind of the highest order, impersonal, objective, and detached. There is no desire to put forth a pet opinion. Truth alone is the motive power, even if that truth goes against one's pet attachments and aversions. The teacher says that even the Vedas, the sacred books of the whole people, belong to the category of ordinary knowledge. Who would dare to say that his own sacred books are ordinary, except he who is of a detached and scientific frame of mind and is in search of truth and not a dogma? He who has no truth to hide, no opinion to uphold, no prejudice to defend, who just wants to know the truth and is prepared to sacrifice everything else in the bargain. No religion except that derived from the Upanishadic tradition has practiced this bold detachment. The follower of every other religion, if asked what is ordinary knowledge, would unhesitatingly reply, all the sacred books of all the religions except my own. But this teacher of the Upanishads has a detachment and boldness proceeding from the love of truth to say that even the Vedas, held in such high veneration by himself and by his people, were secondary. All the sacred books and all the positive sciences and the arts are but lower knowledge, apara-vidya. Sri Ramakrishna in our time re-emphasized the spirit when he said, the Vedas and all other sacred books do not contain God, they contain only information about God. They are like the Hindu almanac that consists of the forecast of the rainfall of the year. But added Sri Ramakrishna, by squeezing the almanac, you are not going to get a drop of water. Similarly, by squeezing the sacred scriptures, none can get God. But by squeezing one's own experience, all can realize God, for He is the one self in all. What then is to be included in the category of para-vidya or higher knowledge? The teacher proceeds to indicate this elusive theme. There is a tremendous field of knowledge, area of experience still left, he thinks, but it belongs to a different order. So he says, that is para-vidya or higher science, by which that imperishable reality is realized. Physical science and all the rest deal only with the things that change, that are perishable. As Sir Arthur Eddington puts it, science gives us knowledge of the structural form and not the knowledge of content. The sacred books give us, in the words of Sri Ramakrishna referred to above, only information about God and not God himself. And yet we feel that, in the words of Eddington, and the Swami quotes here, all through the physical universe runs that unknown content. What is that content? And how can we get it? If the positive sciences cannot get at it, the Swami says, there must be another discipline, another line of inquiry, which must be able to give us that truth. If the sacred books contain only information about God, there must be a discipline that gives us God and not merely information about Him. It is this inquiry that pervades the Upanishads that has made them immortal even as literature. And the nature and scope of that inquiry and the way it was conducted and the truths gained therefrom have something superb about them. There is no effort to uphold a mere opinion, however dear, no struggle to pronounce a dogma and to cling to it and thrust it upon others. There is no trace of tiredness or laziness of mind seeking a resting place on the way. Truth and nothing but truth is the watchword. Suffused with the spirit of truth, they declared, truth alone triumphs, not untruth. The path to the luminous reality is spread out with truth only. And this path to the luminous reality is strewn with the debris of discarded opinions, pleasing dogmas, broken hypotheses, and even dethroned gods. Thought was not allowed to rest on any of them for long. It forged ahead on the two wings of critical discrimination and inner detachment, viveka and vairagya, and wafted by the current of a single-minded passion for truth. One sage puts forth his conclusion about the data of the internal world gathered by him, another shows it as inadequate. This stimulates further inquiry, leading to a deeper pronouncement. There was this unwearied and joyous search and graceful conflict of thought between the most gifted minds, through which thought forged ahead. There was no national dogma or authoritarian church to suppress or arrest it. The whole process reached its consummation in the profound discovery of the imperishable self of the human being, the Atman, and its spiritual unity with the self of the universe, Brahman. The entire process was a joyous voyage of discovery. Looking back, they saw that the steps left behind were also valid, and the human being travels not from error to truth, but from truth to truth, from lower truth to higher truth. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your time and presence and attention here in this space today. In the next episode, the Swami delves deeper into this very core of India that I remember hearing in every social studies class as a child, India's unity in diversity, and luminaries like Sri Jagadish Chandra Bose and his contribution to this tremendously poignant field of scientific and spiritual inquiry. But for now, I shall pause here, and thank you again for being here. This is Preetha. You were listening to Swami Ranganathananda's Eternal Values for a Changing Society. Until next time, I take your leave. Stay well. Namaste.